I want to talk to you about sexual abuse. I'm Jayne from PDTraining. I've dealt a lot with people who've been sexually abused, both adults and children, and it's absolutely devastating consequences for both. Adults often keep their secrets close to their heart for many, many years, and it impacts on every aspect of their lives. And many of them have depression and anxiety, are unable to have normal relationships with their partners, and it is a huge problem. It is very alarming because I've worked in both the adult education and child education industry, and you know, it's extremely alarming just how much it goes on. You would think 1 in 4, that's what they say the statistics are, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in so many for boys. I believe it's far greater than that. I believe this because people confide in me, and it's an alarming number of people, from the people that I've known in my own life and people from all walks of life that were absolute strangers to me, and also while being a master's degree qualified counsellor, when I've actually had to counsel people who have been sexually abused. However, I've spent all my life where people have told me about their sexual abuse, and it has been so devastating to them, where they haven't actually at times been believed by their own parent, which is to me just unfathomable, how anyone does not believe a child when they tell you that they're being touched inappropriately. Certainly, yes, on occasion, maybe a child could make a mistake and misinterpret a touching, but, you know, there's really not much doubt when a child turns around and tells their parent, well, you know, he touched me in certain private areas and tried to kiss me and all these sort of things. Now, you know, I urge you, if you have a child who's been sexually abused or who tells you that they have been, that you need to believe them. And furthermore, I would like to say that the people who have been sexually abused suffer a lot of guilt. And the reason that quite often, and this is something that I say to people who I counsel in this area, you know, often the perpetrator will not just groom the family, you know, become the best friend of the family, and always, you know, I often think, you know, parents, be careful of these people that constantly want to hang around your child. If a male wants to hang around your child all the time, it's not their father, and they just want to be around your child all the time, and they're buying them gifts, and they're, you know, constantly wanting to, you know, babysit and stuff. Be careful. This is not usually what men do. Normally men are like, yeah, I just want to be with the boys. And the thing with the perpetrators, they groom the family, and then they groom the child as well. So they actually buy gifts for the child, and they are very lovely to the family, and they, you know, offer to do all these things for family and offer to do all these things, and they develop trust. And once they've got your trust, that's when they actually start abusing your child, if not before. And, you know, often sexual abuse may start off where it isn't painful, and it isn't, you know, the perpetrator might start with just gentle touching, will not actually, you know, go fully into the sexual intercourse with the child. And so as a child, you know, if you touch a baby touches their genitals. A little baby will touch their genitals, and there's a pleasurable sensation. Little infants get an erection, you know, boys get an erection. So if a perpetrator is not hurting you, if you've been sexually abused and you remember it from being a child, and you allowed it to happen because it wasn't associated with anything painful, there's a lot of guilt associated with that. And so a lot of my clients who have spoken to me about being sexually abused, or children that have told me, you know, teenagers, actually have never told anyone because they think that in somehow it was their fault because they first of all let it happen. And then when they realised and it became uncomfortable and they said, no, I don't want to do this anymore, then that's when the perpetrator will say, well, hang on a minute, you've enjoyed it. You've allowed me to do that. You've actually let me touch your genitals and you've actually enjoyed it. And this is where the secrecy comes into it and the guilt. And that's when a person who's been sexually abused will think, well, you know, I let it happen, so this must be my fault. Well, you know, I'd like to really let you know it is never your fault. Never, 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 never. You were a child. It doesn't matter, you know, it doesn't even matter if you were 9 or 10 and you let it happen. It's quite a natural thing, actually, for children to play with each other where there's no sexual abuse, but they, you know, sometimes they're very inquisitive, or, you know, as teenagers grow up and they may have some sexual experiences with they've never been sexually abused, but they may have sexual experiences with the same sex. You know, quite often boys may play with each other, girls may play with each other. It doesn't necessarily mean they've been sexually abused. So this is quite a normal thing. So if an adult perpetrator is maybe touching the genitals of a child, the child may allow it to happen. But this doesn't mean you, if this has happened to you and you're listening to this video right now, it doesn't mean that, you know, you in some way incited this and you're to blame. You're never to blame. You can never, ever, ever be to blame, because it is the perpetrator who's an adult who knows what he's doing or she's doing, because women and couples abuse children. So even then, be very careful who are around your children, who you leave your children with. It's, you know, look, the stories I've heard would just break your heart, you know. It takes 2 minutes to rape a child. And these are some of the stories that I've heard. And I'm not going to say whether I heard these from teenagers or adults, because, you know, I would hate anyone to recognise themselves, which I doubt, because, yeah, it was a long time ago when this particular story was told to me. However, you know, it was a person who was a child, you know, 6 years old, staying at the parent's house on the weekend. The parent was downstairs having a party. Next minute the door opens and the child is raped. It takes 2 minutes. He's suddenly on top of her, raping her, you know. And the next day this child is bleeding and trying to tell her father, who doesn't believe her because it's his best friend. So this is, you know, the things, I can't even tell you, you know, what it's like to be a counsellor and to hear these things. And I guess the reason that I don't break down in front of children, sometimes I cry by myself, or I don't, my tears are silent, because it's no good me crying. You know, I'm there to help the person. But it does break my heart. And, you know, sexual abuse is happening all the time, and it is far more prevalent than what people think. And often it's from the people you know and you trust. And I've heard stories, you know, a couple who played with this child that was left all the time with the couple. And they were a young couple, a man and a woman. And they actually sexually abused him. And he was able to say to me, look, you know, it was quite enjoyable. You know, that's the problem. It was enjoyable. But it also led him to drug abuse. It also led him to chronic problems in his own life. Quite often someone who's been sexually abused can often not unable as an adult to even have sex without fantasizing about the abuse. And this becomes a huge problem for the person. Because, for example, you'd imagine if your father sexually abused you, or it's been, you know, imagine, or anybody, and continually that it's almost like something in, I guess, our memories, maybe it's even to do with the brain, where the pleasurable sensations of some of that, then the person cannot even actually orgasm without going back and fantasizing about that. What we need to really understand about sexual abuse is that sexual abuse comes in so many forms. You know, there's rape of a child, you know, of 6. Can you imagine? That was what happened. That's like just you know, that's, of course, you know, there's no pleasurable thing in that. I mean, the poor child is just ruined for the rest of their life, and struggles with anxiety and self-harm as teenagers and children growing up, and nobody knows the secret till they told me. Then there's the sexual abuse where, you know, it starts very young, where the child even thinks it's normal because it started so young that they just think that adults have sex with children, and that this is a normal behaviour. And so quite often also, you know, with children, they'll sexually abuse their siblings or their cousins or their friends if they're being sexually abused, because they're used to sexual play. And what I've noticed though is most children get to an age of where they start to look at their own morality, and so they start to have a conscience, and that happens, you know, when you get to 10 or 11 or 12, and so suddenly they decide they'll stop abusing their sibling because they realise that this is wrong. This is something that I often wonder about, what about that particular part of sexual abuse, because with sexual abuse, you know, you see those people that have a moral value, and you see where they decide to stop. You know, they might even be 12 or 13 and they decide to stop. And then you see the people who reach 18, 19, 20, and they do not have the moral values, and they choose to go against the law, which says that we do not have sex with minors, and they sexually abuse children without any conscience. Or maybe they do have a conscience, but they continue to do it anyway. And this is where we have, you know, child pornography, and we have people who lure kids and kidnap kids and sell them on the black market. I mean, it's just terrible. And so I want to make a great distinction between the fact that adults who continue as adults to abuse young children, you know, even if it has happened to them, I believe there's a moral conscience that says, no, you know, I will not repeat what's been done to me. However, with children, you know, we have to also remove the guilt. And when you're listening to this video, if you have been sexually abused and there wasn't, you know, there was some consent on your part, first and foremost, I want to please first of all tell you, you're not to blame. You never will be. You did nothing wrong. You were completely innocent. You were a child. I don't care. I've had, you know, I've had people tell me they've had orgasms with their perpetrator of who's abusing them. You know, it still doesn't make you. You're the victim, and it doesn't make you guilty, nor should anyone ever put any blame on you. And I think if you do feel like that, then you need first and foremost to forgive yourself. And I hate that word. No, I'm going to take it out. I don't want you to say forgive yourself. I want you to take away all that. And that may happen from having to have a lot of counselling. And maybe this video may even help you remove that. And to tell you, I've never been sexually abused, okay, as far as I know. And, you know, I could have been. You don't know. You could have been at 2 or 3. You know, you don't remember, but certainly not in my memories. And yet I talk to so many people, and I've worked this one out, you know, that sometimes from all my experience of talking to people who've been sexually exploited and been through that trauma as a child, that, you know, I've realised that, yeah, there are some who feel so guilty because there was no pain associated with it. And then that's probably why they also keep it a secret, and especially when the perpetrator says, oh, well, I'll tell them you liked it. Well, as a child, you might think, oh my God, well, I did. I liked some of it. Some of it was pleasurable. Okay? Still doesn't make you to blame. The second thing that I want to remove from you is if you then went on to have sexual play, and I'm not going to call it abuse, because as a child, if you've been sexually abused and you're very active like that sexually all the time, it is quite natural that you would probably play with your siblings and your cousins and your friends. So if that's happened to you, again, as long as you've had the moral conscience to stop it as a teenager and realise, and you're not now sexually abusing children, I want you to forgive yourself. you know, and that's really important to your healing, because that is part and parcel of being sexually abused, that often the children and the teens will keep on doing it with siblings and stuff. And I had a client who told me that right through with a relative of hers, you know, she was orgasming, they were going to motels, you know, the way she even described it was that, you know, there were all these pleasurable sort of sensations, and, you know, she used to go to motels and almost willingly, and this was going on till she was about 15, and then she told me that, you know, she was playing around with her brother, but she got to about 12 or 13 and she realised it was wrong and she stopped. And the terrible thing was that, you know, her younger sister was also getting abused. So I was really glad she disclosed to me, because I was able to not only help her but also stop the abuse continuing to happen to her sister, who was only still like not even a teenager. So I hope this video will give you some closure in life, and I hope you will look at maybe doing a course with me. You know, I'm hoping to make a course around sexual abuse that might help you. And so, yeah, my heart goes out to you if that's happened to you. And I know the impact and the devastation that it has put on your life, and please, you're not alone. And parents, please be careful who you leave your children with, you know. You may ask a female friend, look after my child, you know, I'm working a couple of hours a week. Make sure that female friend isn't leaving her or him, your child, with anybody else while they go out shopping for half an hour maybe, or they go and do something. And I know this has happened to people I know. And suddenly, you know, the brother of hers or the husband's brother or whatever is fiddling around with your child. And believe me, it is a far bigger problem than any of you can even fathom. You're not alone. And I believe there needs to be much tougher laws for people who abuse children, and because it has devastating consequences on their life. So if you're looking at this, please keep on returning to my website, looking at my blogs, my free videos, and maybe you could consider even coming to some of my wellbeing courses and webinars that I'm offering. So bless you. My heart goes totally out to you, and I hope I can help you. Take care. It's Jayne Green from PDTraining. Thanks very much for listening. Bye. Yeah, my heart goes out to you if that's happened to you. And I know the impact and the devastation that it has put on your life, and please, you're not alone. And parents, please be careful who you leave your children with, you know. You may ask a female friend, look after my child, you know, I'm working a couple of hours a week. Make sure that female friend isn't leaving her or him, your child, with anybody else while they go out shopping for half an hour maybe, or they go and do something. And I know this has happened to people I know. And suddenly, you know, the brother of hers or the husband's brother or whatever is fiddling around with your child. And believe me, it is a far bigger problem than any of you can even fathom. You're not alone. And I believe there needs to be much tougher laws for people who abuse children, and because it has devastating consequences on their life. So if you're looking at this, please keep on returning to my website, looking at my blogs, my free videos, and maybe you could consider even coming to some of my wellbeing courses and webinars that I'm offering. So bless you. My heart goes totally out to you, and I hope I can help you. Take care. It's Jayne Green from PDTraining. Thanks very much for listening. Bye.